Welcome to Wednesday's edition of the Daily Report. It's February 9th here in Korea. Omicron has indeed prompted changes to the world's COVID-19 strategy, and we have more on this reality during our studio session later on the program. As always, we start with the global COVID-19 updates. And Soa is standing by.
Yes, I am, Sunny. And let's start off with the daily caseload here in the country, which is approaching 50,000. In fact, 49,567 cases were tallied as of 12 a.m. this Wednesday, and that includes 49,402 domestic transmissions and 165 cases from abroad. Now, that's some 13,000 cases more than the day before, for the first time over 40,000, and also compared to last Wednesday, it is a rise by almost 30,000 infections. And all 17 provinces or major cities in the country have reported an uptick in cases. And as you can see, we've just got a few spots that have triple-digit figures of infections, whereas the rest of the nation is seeing at least four-digit figures. And the capital as whole, for the first time, has hit more than 10,000 infections in a single day. Now let's move over to the general number of figures. We've got more than 1.1 million cases so far accumulated in the nation and 6,943 fatalities. However, the daily number of deaths has been maintained at around the 20s and 30s. Unfortunately, we are seeing a slight rise in the number of patients in severe or critical condition to 285 from 268 the day before. And the proportion or the percentage of people who got their first or second shot of COVID-19 vaccine remains at 87.1% and 86% respectively. And on the booster shot front, we've got 55.7% or roughly 28.5 million of the population who got an additional dose. Now, moving abroad, a grim milestone has been posted globally as over 400 million people now have been infected with COVID-19. And that's an additional 2.4 million in the past day, and some 13,000 people have lost their lives. Now, moving over to the figures in some specific countries here, Russia has just hit the 13 million mark. The US, Russia, and Germany are countries that are still seeing more than 100,000 to roughly 200,000 cases on a daily basis. And those are the general updates I have for now, but I'll see you back in a bit. Sunny?
Right, so thank you for the broader update. Here on the domestic front, there's been a change in the quarantine period for COVID-19 patients in the country, and our Choi Min-jung is here to tell us more about that. Min-jung, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Right, so there's been a change in the length of isolation for all COVID-19 patients in the country, Min-jung.
Right. Starting Wednesday, all COVID-19 patients will have to quarantine for 7 days, regardless of vaccination status. Up to now, the 7-day quarantine period only applied to those who were vaccinated, with unvaccinated people required to isolate for 10 days. Also, before the latest change, quarantine began either on the first day of symptoms appearing or on the day of receiving the test results. But now the quarantine clock will start ticking on the day of your COVID-19 test.
Right, and restrictions, Min-jung, have also been eased for those who come into close contact with a COVID-19 patient.
That's right, Sunny. Previously, these people had to quarantine, but they no longer have to if they are fully vaccinated. Instead, they will be subject to passive monitoring for 7 days, and if they experience any symptoms, they can take a PCR test at any time. And if they have no symptoms, they can get a PCR test on the 7th day of the passive monitoring period. And they will be asked to exercise prevention on their own accord, like wearing the masks and avoiding places where they might pass on the virus to other people. Again, this only applies to those who are fully vaccinated, meaning more than 14 days, but fewer than 90 days have passed since their second dose. This also includes those who've gotten their booster shots. However, unvaccinated household members who live under the same roof with a COVID-19 patient are required to self-isolate for 7 days. Those who come into contact with a patient at a high-risk venue, like nursing homes and care centers, will also be required to isolate. They will be released from quarantine once they get a negative PCR test result after 7 days.
Right. Min-jung, with more people now being asked to test themselves at home, I understand the government is considering a free distribution of self-test kits.
Right, a health official said that the government plans distributing the kits free of charge to those under 60. Currently, only seniors aged 60 and above are eligible for regular PCR testing, and those younger can receive rapid antigen tests at local clinics or buy a self-test kit. However, the government is undecided on who will receive these free test kits, as not everyone might need them. The Prime Minister also mentioned this week that there is a limit on the number of kits they can hand out, given the fact that half of the kits manufactured in Korea are exported abroad. The Health Ministry also acknowledged the need to provide kits to the most vulnerable. So when looking at what's being discussed now, it seems likely that self-test kits will only be provided to people in need or those that face unique challenges in either accessing or purchasing them.
All right, Minjung, thank you for now, but do stay with us for more talks. Right, health authorities earlier on this Wednesday morning hosted a relatively lengthy briefing on the COVID-19 situation in the country, and Soa is at the desk with details on that. Right, Soa?
Right, Sunny, lengthy you can say, because there are many questions coming from the public after these recent changes in the system, because the recent cases are being driven by the Omicron variant, which is different from the Delta variant. So with these rising cases of the highly transmissible Omicron variant, consequently, we've got more people that have to get tested and treated. So the government stressed the increase of the role of local clinics and hospitals in accomplishing these tasks. Now, according to a health official at the earlier briefing on Wednesday, following the change in the testing system since February 3rd, which involves the use of rapid antigen tests for the majority of people, the number of local hospitals and clinics participating in this system has risen to 2,106 as of this Wednesday. Preparations are also being made for these local hospitals to take part in managing at-home treatment patients, with the Korea Medical Association's Vice Chairman, who attended the government's COVID-19 response briefing this Wednesday, stressing that with a new system that divides patients in intensive management and regular management groups, for the latter patients, receiving consultations or treatment from neighborhood hospitals will be key to the latest change. He acknowledged, though, that it needs some time for systemization and adjustments to the fast-changing virus trend.
Our current situation is extremely fluid, especially regarding the Omicron variant. And while the rate of hospitalization is on the decline, we're seeing a rapid increase in the number of mild cases, making our situation difficult to forecast. This is not a matter of clinics and hospitals being underprepared, and it is our understanding that numerous medical centers are willing to contribute voluntarily as long as there's a well-functioning system in place.
Right, and so how can COVID-19 patients find out whom to consult if their symptoms worsen?
Well, Sunny, it looks like this will depend on where you live, because individual municipalities will be in charge of informing their citizens on where they can call, for instance, if they are developing any severe symptoms while they're recovering at home. So this can be either done through text messages or also on home pages of these municipalities. So that's the current answer an official gave earlier in the day.
Right, so also on the treatment front, have authorities shared any details with regard to perhaps over-the-counter medication equipment that can prove to be quite handy for home patients?
Right, Sunny. I don't know if you saw recently online, there are people who have been making lists of what kind of medicines you would need if you are recovering at home. But according to Son Young-nae, a senior health ministry official, he said as most of these patients who are recovering at home have mild symptoms or even no symptoms, it is difficult to designate specific medication that they could prepare for. But here is what he did say.
In general, we would recommend that you keep fever medication on hand and also a thermometer to identify any rapid increase in body temperature. In the case of respiratory symptoms like difficulty breathing, we advise you to contact a healthcare provider to receive consultations over the phone.
Right, and finally, so I hear there's been a further analysis on Omicron in comparison to the Delta.
Yes, since we've been now dealing with the Omicron variant for some time now, the government had a more specific figure on the proportion of serious cases stemming from the Omicron variant. Now, analyzing some 22,700 Omicron patients and 28,000 Delta patients, taking the proportion of different age groups into consideration, the age standardized death rate stood at 0.7% in the Delta group and 0.21% among Omicron patients. That meaning the fatality rate for Omicron was around a third of that of Delta. Compared to the seasonal flu, Omicron's death rate was twice as high. 90% of deaths occurred among patients aged 60 and above, while the majority of patients under 50 had mild or no symptoms. Unvaccinated aged 12 and above made up 16% of cases, while they accounted for 64.5% of fatalities. Now, these latest results seem to be roughly on par with other estimates we heard before, also that were based on studies abroad. But the death rate turned out to be 1/3 of Delta, while earlier we've been talking about around 1/5 of Delta. So according to the recent figures, it seems to be 1/3.
Right, I see. All right, so thank you for the local updates, of course. And beyond national borders over in Europe, Minjung, Germany's health minister, appears to be quite cautious about the easing of restrictions as several German states look to lift certain measures. Tell us more.
Right, Sunny. Unlike other European countries, Germany still remains very cautious. The health minister on Tuesday said the virus situation is not under control yet and warned there would be repercussions if antivirus measures were eased quickly. This comes as Germany is still struggling with the Omicron variant, as experts predict the Omicron wave to peak in 1 or 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Hong Kong has imposed the toughest restrictions yet. Starting Thursday, the cap on social gatherings is set to be tightened to 2 people. Vaccine pass mandates are also being extended to shopping malls and supermarkets, while hair salons and religious facilities will temporarily close. This comes as Hong Kong breaks daily records day after day with 625 new infections confirmed Tuesday. New Zealand has also forecast a grim milestone. The Prime Minister said the Omicron wave will likely peak in March, with daily cases possibly reaching 30,000. This as the country sees record high numbers of daily infections hovering around the 200 mark for the past several days.
Right. Meanwhile, as you showed us earlier on with the tallies, the global COVID-19 infection has hit 400 million. And I understand the World Health Organization has voiced concerns, of course.
It has, Sunny, and the organization says that every day 3 to 4 million cases are being reported to the WHO, and also that this is expected to be an underestimate. Now, since the Omicron variant was first designated as a variant of concern in late November, 130 million cases were reported, and also 500,000 of people have lost their lives. Officials also say that especially in the past 4 weeks, there was a sharp increase in deaths around the globe. And that is why WHO officials are asking for countries to ramp up their efforts in vaccinating their people, in the first reason out of protection of severe illness. And also this.
We also need to ensure that we reduce the opportunity for further variants to emerge. And the more the virus spreads, the more opportunities it has to change. So it is critical that we not only increase vaccination coverage to protect people's lives, but also to reduce the spread.
And also currently the WHO says it is working with thousands of scientists to study Omicron sublineages because in fact they have been seeing an increased trend of the BA.2 sublineage.
I see. All right, so thank you for that coverage. See you on Thursday. And Minjung, thank you as well, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
A revision to the election law looks likely ahead of the March 9th presidential race. Lawmakers are exploring the option of permitting COVID-19 patients to cast their ballots from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. after regular voting. Our Lee Kyung-won explains.
The March 9th presidential election is likely to see extended voting time. Voting starts at 6 a.m., but rather than ending at 6 p.m., lawmakers are looking to extend voting until 9 p.m. Those extra 3 hours will solely be designated for COVID-19 patients and self-quarantining voters to cast their ballots. The Parliament's Special Committee on Political Reform on Wednesday discussed adding this revision to the election law. Under the current guidelines, if you get infected or under self-quarantine before the early voting period, you can head to temporary polling stations set up at COVID-19 treatment centers. But the problem comes after the early voting, because if you get infected during that time, there's virtually no way to vote. There will be no temporary polling stations designated for patients on election day. And mail-in ballot applications will be over by then, as they're set for February 9 to 13th. Given the current pace of spread, daily infections could top 170,000, putting more than 600,000 patients unable to exercise their right to vote. Those in self-isolation can still vote after 6 p.m. after the regular voting period, just like in the past general election. But lawmakers are looking to expand this measure to include COVID-19 patients. In an election as tight as this one, those votes could also be a critical deciding factor. Indeed, in the 1997 election, Kim Dae-jung won with a slim margin of some 390,000 votes. The committee will likely hold another meeting in the afternoon to finalize the revised bill. Once they do, the bill will be submitted for a final vote in the upcoming plenary session this month. Young-eun, Arirang News.
In related news, Korea's presidential candidates have gone online to share their discontentment over the recent controversy on the speed skating rink at the Beijing Winter Games. Kim Do-yeon has details.
South Korean presidential candidates have taken to social media to express anger over what they deem to be questionable refereeing at the Beijing Olympics. On Monday, during the short track speed skating men's 1,000-meter semifinals, both South Korea's medal prospects Hwang Dae-hyun and Lee Jun-seo were disqualified, which worked to China's advantage. The ruling Democratic Party's presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung used strong words to condemn the results immediately after, saying he could not hide his anger. When the Korean sports body decided to appeal against the decision to the global top court for sport and the International Olympic Committee, he posted again, Olympic mentality cannot be damaged due to biased refereeing. Opportunities, processes, and results all need to be fair. The main opposition People Power Party's candidate Yoon Suk-yeol also took to Facebook, saying sportsmanship goes hand in hand with the spirit of democracy. And that's why other developed democratic countries such as the US and UK teach children sports at an early age, and expressed his support for the athletes who will continue on to compete, saying the nation knows who the real winners are. Strongest words were used by An Chol-soo of the People's Party, saying China needs to cancel the dirty decisions and return the gold to South Korea, adding that this will be a local party rather than a global celebration. Shim Sang-jung, the candidate from the minor Progressive Justice Party, issued a similar statement saying, in the midst of COVID-19, many people around the world are looking for hope through the Beijing Olympics. The reactions come at a sensitive time for the candidates as the decisions made in Beijing infuriated many Koreans. For the candidates, despite all four coming from different parties, their words are all in unison on this issue. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
On the local economic front, Korea remains on a recovery path but faces a host of external uncertainties. Our Kim Sung-min has more on the latest report by the Korea Development Institute.
South Korea's economy in February is on a moderate recovery track, although there are still uncertainties coming from external factors like COVID-19. According to the monthly report by the Korea Development Institute on Wednesday, the overall recovery trend was mainly driven by the solid growth in the manufacturing sector. The country's latest overall industrial production in December expanded 6.5% from a year ago. This was thanks to a 31% surge in semiconductor production, with autos also jumping 8%. Another positive sign was seen in consumption. December's retail sales recorded 6.5% growth, with January's consumer sentiment index also improving slightly. Exports also continued to see solid growth, with January export figures jumping more than 15%. The recent price hikes in petroleum products and steel largely helped the sector. On the other hand, services dropped 0.4% due to the ongoing spread of the virus, with restrictions on gatherings and business operating hours taking its toll on the service sector. So what's the experts' take on the economic situation for the rest of the year? A survey of 18 local experts suggests South Korea's GDP is expected to grow by 3%. Growth in exports is forecast to slow a little bit to come at 8.7%. The country's job market is expected to add around 300,000 more jobs. Consumer inflation is likely here to stay longer until it subdues to around 2% by the fourth quarter. The KDI also pointed to high raw material prices as a factor that could pose further uncertainty. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the World Trade Organization has largely sided with Korea amid the latter's dispute over Trump-era restrictions on washing machine imports to the U.S. Kim Yo-san reports.
A WTO panel has sided with South Korea in the latest development over U.S.-imposed safeguard measures on washing machine imports. Seoul's trade ministry said Wednesday that the country had won the WTO dispute over the Trump-era safeguard tariffs. It explained a WTO appeals panel stated in a new report that it could not see any violation of WTO rules by South Korea. In May 2018, South Korea launched a complaint 3 months after the Trump administration began levying a 20% tariff on the yearly quota of 1.2 million imported washing machines and a 50% tariff on units beyond that. The measure was extended in 2020 for another 2 years. Watchers saw the measure as largely being aimed at South Korea's Samsung and LG Electronics. The report added Washington failed to clearly demonstrate how the increased imports of South Korean products impose serious harm to the U.S. industry. Washington can file an appeal within 60 days. If not, the case will be closed within 12 months following relevant steps. Kim Yo-san, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. The U.S. announced on Monday that it is offering a reward of up to $10 million for information leading to the identification or location of ISIS-K leader Sanallah Ghaffari. In addition to that, up to $10 million for information leading to the arrest of those responsible for the deadly August 2021 attack at Kabul airport. So who is Ghaffari? The ISIS-K leader rose to power to lead the group and is responsible for approving all ISIS-K operations throughout Afghanistan and arranging funding to conduct operations. In November, the U.S. State Department designated Ghaffari as a specially designated global terrorist. The hunt for Ghaffari comes as a single Islamic State suicide bomber killed 13 U.S. troopers and at least 170 Afghans at Kabul airport during the mass evacuation last August. At least 11 people were killed and 35 others injured as a massive landslide covered several homes in central Colombia on Tuesday. According to the country's disaster management agency, the incident took place in Dos Quebradas after heavy rain in the surrounding coffee-growing province. Authorities have evacuated dozens of homes as the nearby Otun River has overflowed. Landslide-related incidents are not uncommon in the South American nation due to mountainous terrain, frequent heavy rain, and poor construction of housing. Hundreds of trucks were seen driving down a main street in Bangkok on Tuesday to protest against high diesel prices. The convoy of truckers headed towards Thailand's energy ministry, hoping to pressure the government to cap the price of diesel at 25 baht per liter, or around 76 cents, while also calling for the resignation of the country's energy minister.
I'm a truck driver transporting goods between Bangkok and Chiang Mai. The fuel used to cost around 7,000 to 8,000 baht for this route, but it increased to over 10,000 baht. We have to give up profits to cover fuel costs, so I'm here asking the government to help.
However, a spokesperson for the ministry speaking to Reuters on Tuesday said the government could not meet the demands of truck drivers, saying the government has already pegged the price of diesel at 30 baht, or 91 cents, since last October, amid rising global fuel prices. The nominations for the upcoming Academy Awards have been announced, and The Power of the Dog is leading this year's contenders, landing 12 nominations, including the prestigious Best Picture honor. The Netflix film will compete for the top prize, along with Dune, which scored 10 nominations. The Academy Awards will be presented on March 27th. 이승재, Arirang News.
Health is essential, and having said that, in this next report, we share with you ways to maintain it amid the chilly conditions and COVID-19. Do take a look.
Cold weather combined with a prolonged pandemic makes people difficult to engage in outdoor activities. However, a recent study found outdoor activities helped prevent COVID-19.
There is close relationship vitamin D deficiency increased the risk of COVID-19 and its severity. So we strongly recommend to maintain their vitamin D level optimally in human body to prevent COVID-19 infection or mitigate its process.
And there are people who visited a winter festival to enjoy some outdoor activities. While most winter festivals have been canceled this year, small-scale festivals are carefully holding events under strict quarantine measures.
So some might wonder what I'm up to sitting in a tube. Today I am at a festival held in Gyeonggi-do province to have some wintry fun. So at here, from ice sledding to snow rafting, you can find a variety of winter activities.
Children enjoyed sleigh rides despite frigid temperatures. Adults also got some fresh air as they enjoyed winter sports while wearing masks and practicing social distancing.
코로나가 있는데도 여기 와서 재밌게 놀아서 좋았고 가족들이랑 같이 여기 와서 썰매도 타고 빙어 낚시도 해서 즐거워요.
불안감도 있긴 한데 그냥 두려움보다는 사실 집에만 있기 너무 답답하고 힘든 게 더 커서 그래서 나온 것 같아요.
코로나 때문에 못 나와서 깝깝한데 오늘 오랜만에 나와서 마스크 잘하고 손소독 계속하고 사람들이랑 떨어져서 놀고 있어서 나름 안전하다고 생각하고 그냥 재밌게 놀고 있습니다.
According to the government guidelines, only 1/3 of the festival's total capacity is allowed to enter, and the festival is operated by thoroughly complying with the quarantine rules.
QR 코드하고 그 방역 패스자에 한해서만 입장이 가능하고 열도 체크하고 있습니다. 어떤 코로나의 어떤 그 불미스러운 일이 발생했을 경우에 제 사업 자체에 존폐 위기가 발생한다고 것을 생각하기 때문에 그 어느 때보다도 저희들 철저히 더 이 방역 수칙을 준수하고 있다고 하고 있고 첫째도 방역, 두 번째 다 방역하고 있습니다.
So it is always a great idea to go outside and have some fun doing outdoor activities, but during the winter season, we must not forget about the danger of hypothermia, frostbite, as well as injury from falls. It is important to take extra caution when playing winter sports, as falling on ice and snow can result in severe injuries. You may suffer hip or other bone fractures from falls. Also, there are a variety of wrist injuries that can occur from a traumatic fall on an outstretched hand.
손을 빼고 장갑을 낀 채로 걸으셔야 하고 미끄러운 곳에서는 작은 보폭으로 걷는 것도 중요할 것 같습니다. 외출 전 충분한 스트레칭과 기온 적응도 도움이 될 수 있습니다.
In addition, to prevent hypothermia, it is important to wear warm clothing. Also, you need to make sure that socks and mittens do not become wet. Get some extra masks. If your mask becomes wet, replace it with a new one. Outdoor activities are recommended between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. during the warmest hours of the day.
Most seasonal and pandemic respiratory virus infection have more tendency to be infected in winter. It's very important to combine the ventilation of the facility.
Also, according to the journal Transboundary and Emerging Diseases, a 1% increase in relative humidity was correlated with a 7 to 8% increase in the confirmed cases of COVID-19. In other words, you are more likely to contract the virus in winter when humidity is low. Therefore, even if it is cold, it is important to ventilate 3 times a day for at least 10 minutes.
Alright, so this is the third summer with COVID-19 already, and for this season again, make sure to follow quarantine measures for your own health and stay safe. This has been 신세벽.
Korea is adopting a new treatment system amid a frightening rebound in daily infections. For more on the local efforts and those elsewhere to tackle Omicron, I have Professor Yu Byung-up from Suncheon University. Professor Yu, it's a pleasure to see you again. I also have Professor Sarah Ok-shin at Korea University live on the line. It's been a while, Professor Shin. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Right, Professor Yu, we'll start here. Now, if a COVID-19 patient is asymptomatic or has mild symptoms, would it be acceptable to treat the infection, Omicron, like the flu?
Well, Omicron variant is very similar like a seasonal flu, but we have to watching about it. Like 30 to 50 is a young, healthy guy who are infected, also less than 18 years old. They can treat it as like observed at home, and the closely contacted government monitoring line will be safe. But my concern is a third space. Third space means for the doctors, blind spot, vulnerable peoples, and who are single residents, and who are high age. So that's why cannot be accessed to contact the government line. It can be that happen something, even the Omicron variants, because you know that before 2019, seasonal flu make the victim around 3,000 to 7,000 approximately that once in a year. So many people make their lives finished with the influenza. So some people are treated at home with a doctor's prescription like a Tamiflu. Yeah, they'll recover well, but someone who not. That's why we have to make the next step should be a private transport should be allowed. The person who are stayed at home, treated at home the treatment, who are getting worse, and before we move the code in the contact with the government line, government will be distributed hospital, and private transport is allowed to deliver the hospital will be good. But if you not establish like this, so can be the confused people or vulnerable groups.
Right, and keeping in mind the concerns raised by Professor Yu, Professor Shin, where does Korea's new treatment strategy that places priority on the elderly leave those who are relatively young but in need of medical assistance?
Well, obviously, with the record high number for confirmed cases, and we're expecting a rapid surge in infection cases for upcoming months, it's inevitable that the government decided to, take the strategies to focus on treating just the vulnerable, the priority group, such as the elderly. But we must not forget that, the government has left out the important vulnerable groups, such as younger people with chronic underlying conditions and people with physical or mental difficulties who cannot take care of themselves. So we must not forget that these people are also at higher risk of transmitting the virus and developing severe symptoms than the general public do. So the government should really include these groups into the categories where the intensive management group with the elderly, so that they can get the access to treatment kits as well as the daily health checks. So that way, I think we can minimize any infection risk for those individuals who are vulnerable.
Right. And Professor Yu, for COVID-19 patients younger than 50 who are not eligible for Paxlovid, what over-the-counter medication do you recommend?
Well, actually, where I'm working in the hospital, we keep on the line the patient who are, we have to take care of them before the yesterday. So governments delivered some medication like acetaminophen, we can call the Tylenol or paracetamol, and other kind of pain reliever. Yes, we deliver as like the general management. But from today, probably it's not probably delivered on time to the patient who need at home. So from now on, we have to preparing some home remedy like acetaminophen, we can call paracetamol or Tylenol, and ibuprofen for the pain reliever or the fever controller. And sometimes we are already tickling and aching. We need a goggle to prevent it, and some other relief for the coughing. First of all, contact your home doctors, family physician first, to ask them to the prescription for preparing, or your home, the pharmacies, you can, the pharmacists on town, you can access to consult them to preparing for the next step will be fine. So which means paracetamol and the general medication will help, but antibiotics, antiviral agent, you should contact the specialist or the doctors because it needs a prescription.
Right, I see. And now, while Korea's treatment strategy has been altered, its social distancing efforts remain in place. But this is not the case over in Germany, where officials are witnessing record infections but seeking to ease related restrictions. For more on the situation there, I have Dr. Claudia Denkinger at the University Hospital Heidelberg. Dr. Denkinger, it's a pleasure to speak with you again.
Thank you very much for having me again.
Right, Doctor, let's begin with a few words on the resurgence over in Germany driven by Omicron then.
So yes, so we have really skyrocketing numbers here, about 1,500 7-day average in terms of everyday cases. That being said, in comparison to other peak numbers that we have seen in other European countries over the last weeks and months, we are still far away from reaching such peaks. And we do expect that over the coming weeks, modeling suggests in the next week or two, I think it will be a little later because we had a slower rise. We will be reaching our peak, and I do expect it to be lower than it was at the peak in France or Denmark or the UK. But we are having skyrocketing numbers right now, yes.
Right, and despite that reality, Dr. Denkinger, I understand that several German states are looking to lift restrictions. What are your personal thoughts on these efforts?
I mean, on the one hand, we have these very high numbers. On the other hand, we also do have hospitals that are not overloaded at this stage in most parts of the country. So we are not facing the same reality that we had at the peak of the Delta wave. So in combining, on the one hand, the low hospitalization rates with Omicron, as you see also in Korea, and on the other hand, the high numbers, we do think that we can ease restrictions, and that's what many states are actually doing now.
Right, and Dr. Denkinger, what has been the public response to these efforts to ease restrictions?
So generally, the public has been asking to ease restrictions because they also perceive the Omicron variant as less dangerous and see that the less people around them get sick. And right now, I know we have in the hospital over 200 staff that is in quarantine. And hardly anyone has any symptoms. So we also have to face the reality that we have to keep our system going, and with that ease measures so that we can get closer to a normality again.
Right. Meanwhile, back here in the country, Professor Shin, some are calling for the lifting of vaccine pass requirements at drinking and dining establishments. How do you respond?
So yeah, right now Omicron is sort of beyond our capacity to handle. We have to face the fact that we can no longer control the outbreak. All we can do now is to really limit the damage. That's why the government decided to take the hands-off contact tracing strategies. So it's questionable how effective the quarantine pass at the cafe or restaurants will be, since we are not doing the contact tracing anymore. I understand that the rationale for the rapid shift to the Omicron response plan by the government is that Omicron is less threatening than the Delta in terms of mortality and morbidity. But if we keep seeing record high numbers of confirmed cases, we'll also see higher numbers of severe cases in the coming months as well. So I think the government should be more consistent with the quarantine rules and give general public and local clinics step-by-step guidelines or protocols in terms of what to do when you get infected, so that we really can minimize the infection risk and the damage that is caused by the Omicron outbreak.
Right. And moving forward, Professor Yu, authorities here are also framing out a plan to roll out a second booster dose for the elderly at nursing homes. What do you believe needs to be the gist of this particular campaign?
Well, I love this word, second booster shot, not fourth one, because the people are resistant of the number who are waiting for like a 251 shot for the next couple of years. They are resisting about it. But the second booster shot could be necessary for the person. We have to be choose very carefully. Yeah, I believe that Germany as well and Korea, we have to preparing our own data, which is very useful or not. So we have to do the research, people, the unknowns, the people who need the second booster one. Why? Because the Korean government, we are preparing for after the 4 months from the first booster one. So which means probably first booster one done around November, December. So we face on the second booster one will be start from the March and April. But the problem is we still have the classics messenger RNA vaccination and others as well for the classic COVID-19 virus, no Omicron variant. Fortunately, so the Pfizer CEO and Moderna CEO, they announced will be released soon of the new vaccines against these Omicron variants. So we can planning to give them for the second booster one. Probably they make me understand more easy and less resistant. Now Korea's current situation is around the 50% complete the first booster one. So among the 50% of the first booster one, how many percent who will necessarily the second booster one? Let's choose very carefully and show them to this efficiency and safety, and we listen from their opinion. So if we push them to the shot, even if push, they will keep away from us.
Right. Staying with COVID-19 vaccination, Dr. Deng Kinga, what can you tell us about the vaccination process over in Germany?
Yeah, so I'm impressed by the Korean rates in terms of vaccination. Unfortunately, we haven't been so successful in, I would say, normalizing the vaccination for people. And we have about 25% of the population and still about 10% in the over age 60 that are not vaccinated. And this is the main concern in respect to the rising numbers right now, because these are the vulnerable populations who are at high risk of getting severe disease. And these are the ones we need to be reaching, but we don't seem to be able to reach them. I think it's in part because of the way the public communication has been initiated around the vaccine. I think there have been opportunities missed. And also, I think in part it's the populations who have a migrant background in Germany who are not well reached. And I observe that especially in my own practice, where I see a large population of people who have migration background and might not be as comfortable with the German language, with the German system. And there have been missed opportunities. And that's what's biting us right now in respect to easing measures, because these are the people who end up, unfortunately, in the hospital.
Right. Right. And staying in Germany, Dr. Denking, I understand that Germany has granted the green light to Novavax recently. What can you tell us about the efficacy of Novavax? And perhaps do you see this particular vaccine as perhaps boosting the vaccination rate over in Germany?
Yes, I mean, the Novavax vaccine certainly has advantages in terms of building on a known mechanism of vaccination. And with the mRNA vaccines, people had the concern about this new mechanism and potential side effects or consequences from it. Although scientifically speaking, I think not substantiated concerns. That being said, it's always better to have something that has been used before, and with that, Novavax certainly can convince more people. In terms of its efficacy, I mean, we have seen very good data that makes it coming close, and I would say, in light of the comparability of the studies, probably as effective as the other vaccines. And we do hope that this will create another booster, but I am skeptical, frankly, because I think the problem is not so much in the scientific understanding of the vaccine, but in the communication and reaching the people we have thus far not reached.
Right, which really is an unfortunate reality. But staying with Novavax, Professor Shin, now Novavax's vaccine will be available to adults here in the country starting later this month in Korea. How does Novavax's vaccine compare to that of Pfizer and Moderna? And do you believe it will perhaps further raise Korea's vaccination rate?
Well, so Novavax vaccine uses more conventional approach than the vaccine that we are already approved and given, like mRNA vaccines or viral vector vaccines. So their platforms are totally different. They're protein-based vaccines, and they use tiny particles studied with viral proteins, usually mixed with immune-boosting compounds like adjuvants. So using this conventional method has been well accepted in the world as other successful vaccines in the past. So this could make the vaccine more attractive to people who are hesitant to be inoculated with vaccines, like those with the Pfizer or Moderna that uses the new technology, like mRNA technology. So, so far, the clinical data suggests that the Novavax vaccine was found to be protective against the Delta variants that we had before. The company recently announced that it can generate an immune response against the Omicron variants, but this has not been peer-reviewed or published officially. So it remains to be seen how strong and how robust the protection will be against the Omicron outbreak.
Right. And Professor Yu, what are the prospects of using Novavax as a booster dose, like Professor Shin mentioned, especially for those who suffered from side effects after vaccination with an mRNA vaccine?
Well, we're still looking for the medical evidence to the link from the messenger RNA type of vaccines make the myocarditis, kind of heart issues. Yes, but you know what? People say it's not related much, but actually there are persons who are suffer after the vaccination. Yes, there are. Anyway, people are worried about it. So messenger RNA type like Moderna and Pfizer one can make some heart issues and some lymphadenitis, swollen limbs, and the angular axillary area can be. So, but you know what? The many medical experts comment already. Novavax type is totally different, made it also long history about it. So, but usually we recommend for like if you started from Pfizer, better to keep and finish the Pfizer one. But so nowadays, if you have some bad experience before with some other type of vaccination, yes, better to switch. But Korean governments still now we recommend from the beginning who are never vaccinated yet. Let's start with the Novavax one from the first. But if you who had bad experience before, yes, we highly recommend to cross vaccination in cross brands from the Pfizer, Moderna, to the Novavax. Yes, can be, but Korean government highly consider, but not permit yet. But I hope they will permit soon.
Right. And Dr. Denkinga, what now is your assessment perhaps of the current global spread of COVID-19? And do you believe Omicron is paving the path to an endemic scenario of this particular pandemic?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think we can only talk about the end of the pandemic if we really have offered everybody in the world an opportunity to get vaccinated. And we are far away from that. I think in Korea and Germany, we're in a luxurious situation. But I do think that the Omicron variant has shown us that we cannot vaccinate our way out of this pandemic. We can protect people with the vaccines from severe disease. And we will have more variants coming. And I think we have to get used to COVID-19 being with us, similar to like influenza is with us in an endemic state with changed variants that are coming every year. That being said, I think if we do not have so much SARS-CoV-2 circulating in the world globally, we can also expect that the virus is going to evolve more slowly so that we have less of immune escape in future variants to come. So I think COVID-19 will stay with us. I think we have a vaccine and we need to offer it to everybody in the world in order to protect people and then live with it.
Right, a valid point there. Professor Shin, back here in the country, there are changes in our treatment strategy, and amid those changes, what do you believe is of utmost importance in the case of infection now?
Well, so if you test positive, although you don't have any symptoms or you have mild symptoms, you still have to be self-isolated for 7 days. And you basically have to take care of yourself at home. So if your symptoms get worse and develop high fever or chest discomfort, then you must contact your healthcare providers for the advice, and you need to get the help. And it is important to monitor the daily conditions as well. And it'll be wise to have medications like Tylenol at home. And most importantly, you need to drink a lot of water, stay hydrated, and take a good rest, just like what you would do when you have a cold symptoms.
All right, Professor Shin, as always, thank you very much for your insights. And Professor Denkinga over in Germany, thank you very much for being with us earlier at this hour. And Professor Yu here in the studio, as always, thank you very much for your insights. Right, well, the pandemic remains a threat around the world. Do take care to ensure your health as well as that of those around you. Thank you for watching.